What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Logos Podcast. This is Max.
This is Joey.
And on today's episode, we've got some heat content coming up. But before we get to that content, if you're new to our platform, welcome. We've been here expecting you.
We've been expecting
It is that time.
We've been expecting you.
It is. Yes, to us a while ago that you've been here.
Yeah.
Welcome to our platform. We're two seminarians of the Roman Catholic Church, which means we're studying to be Catholic priests. We're not there yet, but we get to wear the bling. And so
Get the drip.
Get the drip on us one time. But we have studied philosophy formally.
Yep.
We're studying theology currently. And so a lot of our conversations revolve around those two topics, bringing in different kind of cultural references such as movies, music, art. What else have we done?
Yeah, basically we're just trying to introduce you, our listeners, to the beauty and richness of the spiritual and intellectual tradition of the Catholic Church. So if you're new to Logos Podcast, that's what we're about. And we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Maybe before we get into this episode, this would be a good time to remind our faithful listeners and
our newcomers,
maybe even our newcomers, that if you like Logos Podcast, if you want us to keep doing what we're doing, we certainly do, you can support us by going to patreon.com/Logos Podcast. You can become a monthly donor
or a daily donor
if you want. I think actually you can just become a monthly donor.
Okay, never mind. It's not an option.
But just any amount that you'd be willing to give us to support our project would be greatly appreciated. You can also rate our show on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and stuff, Spotify, wherever that might come. Can you rate things on YouTube?
Yes, you can rate things on. Well, I guess you can. You can like or dislike.
Yeah.
But you can, as of recently, Spotify updated their app to where you can rate.
Rate us if it's a good rating, and then I guess writing a review for us too would be super helpful.
Share, like, comment, subscribe.
This is the type of jargon you hear at the beginning of every podcast, but this would actually be super helpful for us.
It is
if you would do it.
There's a reason why everybody does it,
Yeah. So thank you in advance for doing that. We have a TikTok page. We have a website,
Instagram,
all of which will be linked to probably the video description
below.
And we're glad you're here. We're praying for you. We're always praying for our listeners. And, wanted to keep bringing you guys more good content. So today we got a fun one.
We do got a fun one. One that's been very fruitful for me. I don't know about you,
Same,
Joey.
yeah.
Right?
And it's timely, too.
It is, given the season that we're in the church's liturgical calendar here, schedule, if you will. We're going to be talking about Our Virgen de Guadalupe.
Nuestra Señora.
La Morenita, the little brown-skinned woman.
Is that really?
Yeah, little brown-skinned lady, I've
never heard that.
Yeah, La Morenita.
Title.
Yeah.
Yeah, Our Lady of Guadalupe, for you English speakers out there. And
she's very kind of popular in Mexican culture.
Yeah.
But she is Our Lady of the Americas.
Yeah, the patroness of the Americas.
Patroness, right? And so she is impactful and important for us as here the United States of Americans.
Yeah, and she's a big deal. So I guess I didn't even think about this when we were preparing this episode, but it would be helpful to clarify before we start.
Yeah.
Like, what is a Marian apparition, right? So, Mary lived in Nazareth 2,000 years ago. She's the mother of Jesus Christ, the mother of God, the new Eve, right?
Theotokos.
The Theotokos. She's a big deal. Because God's into doing really cool stuff, he has allowed the Blessed Mother to appear at different times in history. So throughout the church's history, on many different occasions, in many different places. Now, importantly, we don't believe that Mary's coming to reveal anything new or anything that was not, completely revealed in the coming of her son, Jesus Christ, right? When Mary comes, she is just re-articulating typically the gospel as it was revealed in Jesus Christ.
Or reaffirming certain points that in contention.
Points of it based on certain historical times and circumstances, right? And also as a disclaimer, if you're Catholic and you're trying to be faithful to the church, these apparitions are not a part of the public deposit of faith. So you're not bound to believe in them. Yeah. But the church has, with the approved apparitions of Mary, so Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Kibeho, places like this. They're all over the place. Czestochowa, Our Lady of Good Help in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's right.
United States. The church has investigated them thoroughly and proposed them to you in order to help you in your faith life. So, you are allowed to believe in them, and I certainly tend to believe in most of the ones that I encounter. And Our Lady of Guadalupe, especially, I think we'll start talking about the evidence for why it's reasonable to believe in it, even though it's not essential for your salvation to believe in the apparitions that took place.
Good qualification there.
Yeah.
And I think part of the episode will also kind of include Juan Diego, which is a big part of the story here. Juan Dieguito. You know, my brother, when he was in religious life for a time, he was going to take that name.
Really?
Yeah, Brother Juan Diego.
That's
that would have been his choice. You know, he wouldn't have had the full kind of choice to make it, but he was going to write it in. So anyway, that's cool. So Juan Diego, we'll talk about
today's his feast day. We're recording this on his feast day.
That's right. So whether you receive it or not on his feast day, pray to him. He's a saint.
He's a saint.
As of 2002, not even that long ago, right?
Well, he was probably a saint before that.
I should say he was formally made a saint. He was canonized, as we would say, in the church in 2002 by Pope John Paul II.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? We'll also bring in some history of the Aztec and American Indians history into the episode, and kind of talk about some of the context and some of the things that were happening historically for an apparition to have the effect that it did and does still today in this world. And so, mi gente, ojalá que te guste. I hope you like it, and I hope that our information is reliable, structured, and brings you to a closer encounter with our Lord as we talk about some of these things. So yeah, what is the first thing?
Yeah, I was going to ask you first. How's your day going?
That's lame. My day is going very well. So we just got done with classes in seminary. We have finals week, but we don't have any classes. We just have our exams.
Yeah, finals week is great.
It is. It is like it's so kind of pumped and doing all kinds of stuff. It's kind of a break almost to have finals for us. So that's good. My family's well. I've spoken to them recently. Yeah, man, all things are coming to a nice resolution in a couple weeks. I'll be in Israel.
We're going to Israel.
You're going too? I forget. So here's the thing. I've been like so busy. I haven't even had time to really even think about our trip. Have you? Has that been your experience? Yeah. So the time will come, and I was going to prepare for it, but now I'm just going to go in and just experience and see what our Lord has in store for me there.
Yeah. I've been praying that it be a life-changing experience for me, you know.
Yeah. How are you?
That's good. I'm good. We're actually, funny, timely, we're doing this episode. We're getting ready at the parish I'm at to celebrate Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Nice. So
a big Hispanic community at my parish, a lot of parishioners from Mexico, certainly, but then, she's the patroness of the Americas at large, like we said. So we've got this upcoming Sunday, the 11th, because the feast is on December 12th every year, but we're celebrating on the 11th. So we've got processions, celebrations, food.
So much food.
Singing. Las Mañanitas.
Las
Posadas. Yeah. So it's going to be awesome.
Las Posadas. We got to stop that, dude. Okay, we got to stop. We got to put that. We got to kill that. Okay, never bring it back again.
I don't know. I'm not convinced we need to kill it. Okay. All right. So speaking of Our Lady of Guadalupe, Nuestra Señora, let's talk about her. We should just maybe start by just telling the story.
Right? That's a good way.
And it's hard to really appreciate the full significance of the story without getting a little bit of the historical context for the time period we're talking about, what's going on globally in Mexico. And I guess what's relevant to start, so the apparitions of Our Lady took place in 1531. Rewind a few years to 1519. That's when the Spanish conquistadors came from Spain.
Famously, Hernan Cortés,
right? Yeah. So he was leading this small band, relatively small band of colonizers, of conquistadors who were coming to, search out to acquire land for the crown of Spain. But then there were also priests with them who were
Franciscan priests, particularly
came to evangelize. Like that was they were on mission, right?
Yeah.
And certainly even the conquistadors would have identified themselves, branded themselves as Christian, right? They were bringing
the Catholicity
Christian
of Spain,
Catholic civilization. That was kind of part of their whole deal. So Hernan Cortés, brings his men. Actually, I heard an incredible story. There's a small group. They arrive on the eastern shore of what is now Mexico, and they're looking into the jungle. And there's a relatively small group of them, and they've done some recon, so they've even encountered some villages that they're going to have to go up against.
Yeah.
And they're outnumbered, even though they have things like horses and stuff that the natives don't. But they're outnumbered, and there's like 10 ships that have been docked on the or like anchored down on the shore of this beach. And Hernan Cortés, in order to make sure that his men are resolved to like that they're not scared, that they're not going to flee and like retreat back home to Spain, that they're actually willing to go face all this danger that they're going to face. He sank 9 of the ships.
Holy crap.
He sank 9 of the ships, and he looked at his men. He was like, all right, anyone who wants to leave, get on that one ship and go now. And of course, you're a soldier, you're a Spanish conquistador. You're not going to like be the one guy.
You're a devout Catholic too, right? So ideally, you're so no. So this, it's obviously we don't want to hyperbolize this.
You know
thing.
what he's trying to say.
All right, you don't want to exaggerate this and say they were all good, faithful warriors, but the idea is that they're Catholic and they're supporting the crown, which is Catholic.
Right, exactly. So no one got on that 10th ship, and he sunk that too.
Yeah.
So he literally burned all their bridges and cut them off. So that's a crazy story.
Yeah, it is. Imagine that, dude. You're seeing like your one voyage, just like ripped to shreds.
Just sailed across the Atlantic.
Here I have a little knife on me and a mediocre gun. I got a nice looking horse, but
Okay, so the Aztecs. I mean, the Spanish conquistadors. They encounter the Aztec civilization when they get in here, right? And this is a relatively. I mean, they're surprised at how sophisticated the civilization is, right?
But how different it is.
But very different.
Right. So this is, kind of developing, if you will, Europe. This is Spain, and it's kind of, and in high society at the time when the kind of conquistas were even possible, with all the resources necessary to go to a different land and get on a boat and make these voyages. And so here they come, Catholics, civilized, to this other culture that is civilized, such as the Aztecs. But the religion is different. The way of life is very different.
Very different way of life. I read that, whereas like the Greeks and Western civilization developed mathematics fairly early on, like even, thousands of years after that, the Aztecs had not yet developed like advanced mathematics yet at this point, even though they did have things like cities and waterways and commerce, but their cities were organized around temples. These pyramid-shaped temples. And this is something that the Spanish encountered and were really pretty horrified by, is the religion of the Aztecs. So it was pagan, obviously. It was not Christian. Yeah. And it was
pantheistic, right? In one sense. So pantheistic is like God kind of expresses himself through like nature.
Yeah,
through
God
creation.
Is kind of like is nature.
Yeah, God too, right? And so they try to appease nature, for them kind of God, through offering atonement or sacrifices for the expiations or the sins or the transgressions they committed against nature or whatever, by offering people
human sacrifice.
Human sacrifice. I mean that's one of the things that here the Catholics would have been like, what?
Right. Catholics show up in there.
Right. And it's not like one or two, like I'm not saying one or two is justified, but it's like it's thousands. I mean it's by by the swarm they were killing these people.
Like in a day.
Right.
Sometimes up to like 20,000 in one day.
And so, you coming in as a, civilized Spaniard,
right?
And you see these people with, tattoos and bones to their noses and ears and, yelling all this kind of stuff, excruciating screams from the person being sacrificed, with the heart still pulsing in your hand. And what are you supposed to do? You have a crucifix and a little poor Franciscan friar with you to your left, and you're supposed to support your men with these hundreds of people doing this crazy. So like, you're coming into this imagery here of people sacrificing, human sacrifice going on to appease God who manifests himself through nature on the top of these pyramid temples, which was for them, as you said, kind of the pinnacle of society. These temples, everything else revolved around temples, which temples themselves being kind of the epicenter of society is not new to this culture, right? So that's the case with the Jewish people. That's the case with even the Israelites. And you see even when like in the Old Testament, the center of worship is the place that the people,
but I mean,
gathered.
So like, just to give our listeners a little bit of an idea as to, and this is partly to combat the narrative, like the Spanish we're not trying to defend everything the Spanish conquistadors
not
did,
by any means.
Actually,
we'll talk about some things about Hernando Cortez.
But often a picture is painted of history that these big, mean Spanish conquistadors came in and
smoking their cigars,
right, and just like destroyed this completely innocent, harmless civilization. Well, that's actually, I mean, they encountered some pretty disturbing stuff. So these religious feasts on which, people would be, brought up to the top of these pyramid temples, and like black-robed, long-haired priests who were chanting and doing dances and singing. They would just slaughter these victims, right? They would eat them. They would skin them alive. They would rip out their hearts and then just discard the bodies down the temple. I mean, it was
for the sake of of appeasing their sins, but also just for God, quote unquote, to produce rain.
Yeah.
To take away famine.
Right. Exactly.
To produce crops.
If the desired effect didn't come about quickly, they got more and more frenzied and more violent and more just gnarly. So I mean, it was nasty. I mean, and I think so. One of the interesting parts about this society is the most important deity in their religion was, I don't even know. Can you the Q one? It starts with a Q.
Oh, Quetzalcoatl. I don't know. It's a serpent god. I'm sorry.
The serpent god. Right. So for
it was
me,
feminine, right? It was a feminine.
I think this one was masculine.
Okay.
And there was some connection, and we'll talk about this. There was a symbolic connection between the serpent god and also the moon. So those two symbols were important together. But to me, I see this pagan civilization offering thousands and thousands of human sacrifices to the serpent god. I certainly read into that, and other people have too. Historians have too. Demonic intervention in this society, right? Because that is, to be sacrificing human lives like that's diabolical.
Yeah, and part of the reason we'll talk about ultimately the Spanish crown or in Catholicity had the effect it did is because the people within their own culture kind of started recognizing that what the Christians propose as worship is vastly different and much more accessible and possible
and life-giving.
But another thing too is I guess this is the one I was talking about is the mightiest god of Aztec religion was one of the deities of the Aztec religion was a great mother goddess.
Yeah.
Right? Tonantzin.
Yeah.
Tonantzin. And the temple stood at the summit, and this is very important, right?
Right.
Because what started happening is that people would offer these sacrifices particular places oriented to, I don't know, whatever, maybe nice scenery or whatever. But one of them was on a small hill named Tepeyac.
Right. So you're going to hear that name again, but that's where, at one point in the Aztecs' history, that's where a temple to the mother goddess was, where they would offer sacrifices to the mother goddess.
And the imagery of this mother goddess was a serpent.
Yeah.
Right. Which again, when we talk about the apparition,
she had a head made up of serpents and stuff. It was pretty gnarly. Okay, so basically what happens, long summary, you can actually read about some of this history. It's really fascinating.
I got a couple books here, but there's all kinds of, I learned so much.
So Cortez and his men, his small group of men, rally across the Mexican terrain towards Mexico City, which is the capital.
Sure.
And they're conquering these various villages and tribes of Aztec peoples. And not only conquering them, but then also evangelizing them because they got priests with them and they're starting to proclaim the gospel to them. And this people is starting to hear about this religion it's not about sacrificing humans in order to appease the gods. It's about God becoming a human, sacrificing himself in order to save the people.
And peace.
And love.
And love.
And hope.
Charity.
Right. So they're actually, what begins to happen is the natives begin to join with Cortez and his men in marching across the Mexican terrain against their own emperor, who is eventually, again, the history is pretty cool to read, but I won't get into the details, who's eventually conquered by Cortez and his men. They're successful in taking the capital city of Mexico, in dethroning Montezuma II. He was the emperor at the time, the Aztec emperor. And they destroy the principal temple to the big serpent god, and they build a Catholic church in its place, right? And then the conquistadors and the priests with them set about trying to establish Spanish civilization there, but also trying to evangelize the people.
Yeah, and that's one of the weird things going on here. So I'm going to use here, for example, Hernan Cortés, who's kind of the permanent leader and kind of the name everybody's aware of in these conquistas. When he was, for example, he had conquered and beat Montezuma II, right, this great chief leader of the Aztec people, one of the things he was known for doing was, while he's kind of ransacking villages and taking over different places and setting up kind of Christian worship and trying to evangelize them and trying to show them about engineering and whatever else the case may be, kind of trying to integrate them into the kind of more developed Spaniard culture, he would also evangelize these leaders, but at the same time he was also kind of a womanizer. He was kind of a violent man, kind of a he had some vices, like drinking and kind of was kind of a violent dude. But at the same time, there was this real weird relationship with the gospel that he had in trying to bring these leaders to encounter the same truth. He found, at least to some extent in his life, fruitful and life-giving, whether it was a power struggle or something he actually viewed as valuable.
Yeah.
And that's like the difficult part here going on. It's like, and that is kind of a more outside of the realm of this episode. Like that's kind of the moral question. Like, how do you go about that?
How do you assess this?
How do you integrate other cultures and pagan cultures into a more Christian? Like that's a kind of a vast conversation to be had. But anyways, it's that kind of paradox going on here.
Right.
Like,
so we're certainly not trying to canonize Hernan Cortez
by any means,
or any of the Spanish conquistadors, or endorsing everything they did. Right.
Yeah.
But it's easy to see how they themselves probably considered themselves as like bringing the light. I mean, even in their own kind of barbaric conquering behavior, they probably saw themselves as bringing the light to this civilization of death and darkness.
Yeah.
And did contribute to the spread of the gospel, at least in a small.
And so, as Joey said earlier, like this is not so black and white.
Right.
Like the Aztecs are not.
It's messy.
Exactly. It's ugly. It's bloody. I mean, literally.
Yeah. Literally.
And so it's like there's like the Aztecs aren't completely innocent. They're also not completely guilty, and vice versa. The Spanish are not completely innocent, but they're also not completely guilty. And
right.
That can be traced. So that's important. Discussing this.
Okay. So. Good. Okay, so that's kind of the background. What's been going on in this area around the time of leading up to these apparitions.
Can I also say something else I think is important is and we briefly mentioned it, but as this is all kind of unfolding and Montezuma and the kind of the larger portion of the Aztec people had been now conquered, there's a lot of things also going on in the Aztec culture itself, which is famine. Their sacrifice isn't as effective as it once was.
Right. To the degree that human sacrifice was ever
became
effective.
so exactly. Like and that, like all of a sudden, hey, that's my uncle. Hey, that's also my sister you killed. Hey, that's also my mom you sacrificed. My dad.
Yeah.
Hey, that's like all of a sudden, the population is getting disassembled anyways, and kind of the structure of the civilization that was once maybe more prominent in the Mexican culture, or let's just say at the time Aztec people's culture, is kind of also suffering, right? Yeah. And we use here Aztec kind of broadly speaking, because there's many tribes within the Aztec people.
We're generalizing.
We're obviously generalizing here, but I think it's important to keep in mind that many of these tribes are already suffering, and so like part of the apparition of our Blessed Mother comes at a very timely time.
Very timely time, yeah.
Very timely time. And that's, as Joey mentioned earlier, that's the kind of real kind of meat of this. Like our Blessed Mother and our Blessed Lord always kind of show us about themselves at a perfect time in history.
Also, I guess it makes sense to note that 1500, the Protestant Reformation is going on over in Europe, right? Yeah. So 1517, Martin Luther posts his 95 Theses to the door of the cathedral, right? So, I mean, so people are leaving the Catholic Church in droves over in Europe. Okay, so now the Spanish conquistadors have conquered Montezuma, and they set about trying to evangelize, and they're having a lot of trouble doing it because this paganism, this culture of death, is so deeply rooted in this Aztec people. One person, however, that they are successful in converting to the Christian faith is a poor peasant farmer and his wife
little
named
guy.
Juan Diego.
San Juan Diego for you, sir.
San Juan Diego. Actually, that wasn't his name before, but that's the name he took when he was baptized.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. So that's his Christian name. Juan Diego was born in 1474. Yeah. And it was in 1525 that he and his wife Maria Lucia were baptized.
Classic name, Maria.
So it's pretty cool because I mean they were very devout by all accounts. They would. I mean, for us, this is crazy. For these people, I think it was pretty standard, but they would walk 15 miles one way to Mass.
You don't do that?
I wish I did. I wish I had to walk 15 miles. I mean, I don't, but I'd feel much more manly if I did.
I don't think so.
So on Sundays, they would wake up, walk 15 miles. They wake up super early to get to Mass, receive catechesis, Christian instruction, and then they'd make the journey home at the end of the day.
Go to Mass?
Go to Mass, yeah. So, I mean, they were very devout people, very, poor farming people.
Yeah, actually, one of the people that one of the guys that baptized, I had it here earlier, that baptized Juan Diego was Father Peter Legand, one of the first Franciscan missionaries to have landed in the New World.
Oh, that's
actually,
right.
Interestingly enough. And so again, Juan Diego had Catholicity in his veins.
Yeah, he became Catholic. And then, tragically, in 1529, his wife Maria Lucia, she died, and they didn't have any children.
Yeah, she died childless.
So Juan Diego, here he is. He's an older guy, so he moves actually to live closer to his uncle Juan Bernardino.
Bernardino. It's one of my good buddies' last names. I wonder if he's related to him.
Bernardino.
Yeah. Alejandro.
His uncle was older and his health wasn't great, so Juan wanted to be closer to him to kind of be able to care for his needs. But he continued to make his weekly trek to and from Mass, those 15 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in 1531 that stuff started to get a little crazy. So
and so I think this is where we kind of takes off. So the first apparition, there's 3 in the matter of 4 days.
3 in over the course of 4 days.
Yeah, okay, yeah. 3 over the course of 4 days. So the first one happens on Saturday, December 9th, 1531.
Which apparently at that time, was the Feast of the Immaculate Conception.
Yes.
So Juan was going to celebrate, to assist at Mass for Our Lady, like in honor of Our Lady, right? Sure. So that's kind of cool.
It is. And at this point in time, Juan is about 57 years old.
Yeah.
That's kind of the calculation here. And so he would rise early in the morning, go to Mass, kind of take his daily trek. And what happens?
Yeah, so he's going to Mass this day, and as he's getting to this little hill, which he has to cross all the time, Tepeyac Hill, where that old temple of the Mother Goddess used to stand.
Yeah.
He's kind of
Tonantzin or whatever.
Yeah, that old Mother Goddess with the serpent head. Tepeyac Hill is about 130 feet high, and he senses this. Well, first he hears music actually coming from the top of the hill. Yeah, like enchanting music, and then he looks up and he sees this light. And so he's drawn like intuitively up this hill, and he hears a voice calling down to him saying, Juan Dieguito, like diminutive, right? This little, like my little Juan.
My little one. Same one like La Morenita. It's like the little brown-skinned woman.
Yeah. Yeah. So he goes up the hill and he encounters this incredibly, breathtakingly beautiful woman, kind of radiating light,
super young,
who appears to be somewhere like 14 years old or something like that, is the guess. And she says again, Juanito, my son, where are you going? And
she doesn't say it in English though.
No, so she's going to be speaking Juan Diego's language, which at that time is not even Spanish. It's the tribal language that he would have,
with some Spanish, I guess, intermixing at the time. But yes,
and he says to this lady, he says, "Noble lady, I'm on my way to church to hear Mass." And then she says this beautiful quote that Juan Diego would have remembered and recounted many, many times for the rest of his life. Do you want to read this quote from Our Lady? I mean, for me, when I read these give me the chills. I mean, to listen to these words.
Give you the goosies.
The goosies.
The goosies.
I'm getting the goosies.
So our Blessed Mother, I should say, he responds. Our Blessed Mother says to Juan Diego, "Know for certain, dearest of my sons, that I am the perfect and perpetual Virgin Mary, Mother of the true God, through whom everything lives. The Lord of all things, who is the master of heaven and earth, I ardently desire to be built here for me, where I will show and offer all my love, a temple, my compassion, my help, and my protection to the people. I am your merciful mother, the mother of all who live united in this land, and of all mankind, and of all those who love me. All those who cry to me, of those who have confidence in me. Here I will hear their weeping and their sorrows, and will remedy and alleviate their sufferings, necessities, and misfortunes. Therefore, in order to realize my intentions, go to the house of the Bishop of Mexico City, and tell him that I sent you, and that it is my desire to have a temple built here. Tell him all that you have seen and heard. Be assured that I will be very grateful, and will reward you for doing diligently what I have asked of you. Now that you have heard my words, my son, go and do everything as best you can." I thought that was interesting the way it ended. As best you can.
Yeah.
Right? Because he was a poor guy, and he knew that. He fell to his knees as soon as he saw her, because he was like, I don't know who am I? I'm taking care of my uncle. My wife's dead. Just let me get to church, kind of thing. He set off. Juan Dieguito had this
he was
encounter.
overwhelmed by the majesty of the woman he had just encountered.
What do you do? Because you still have several miles to go, and you're like,
start running.
I don't know, like put your hands in your pockets, and you're just like,
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be reading some of these. I just want to make a disclaimer. That's a beautiful quote from Our Lady. Some people might be, modern listeners might be listening to this and feel immediately skeptical of like, okay, how do we know that she said all that, right?
Yeah.
Like, first of all, it's helpful to keep in context the fact that at this point in history, like the Aztecs were not really like a literary people, so most of their religious and their religious traditions would have been passed down orally, right? And we fail to appreciate the degree to which people were able to memorize and transmit long chunks of text orally, right?
The printing press hadn't existed,
right? Exactly.
In this new world yet.
And this is the case with scripture that was passed down orally for many, many years before it was finally, put down in writing. Yeah. So that's kind of the first defense I would make of a quote like this being authentic. And secondly, if the Mother of God appeared to you, and I'm pretty sure it would be seared into your mind.
I mean, you can remember lyrics for the love of God.
Exactly.
Like why couldn't you remember a paragraph of a quote from
And as we'll hear, Juan Diego ended up spending the rest of his life telling and retelling the story of this encounter. So he and those who knew him and those who would have encountered, the events that took place here, these words would have been pretty well known. Sure. So that's kind of how we have access to them. But anyway, Juan gets this message and he sets off to Mexico City to go to this bishop, probably feeling pretty overwhelmed, but also kind of unequipped, to present himself to the bishop. Bishop Zumarraga, is that how you would pronounce that? Zumarraga. Yeah. So amazingly, Juan goes to the bishop's residence and actually knocks on the door, and the servants come and they let him in. And he gets admitted into the bishop's residence, and he's made to wait for like hours until the bishop's actually available to come and speak with him. And finally, the bishop does. And Juan kind of tries to kind of like pour out the story.
I think the first time is he's trying to tell him a story, and the bishop's like, come back when I have more time.
That's right.
He's like, come back when I have more time, and he'd pray about Juan's story. Yeah. Right. And so he's sent off.
So he sent Juan Diego.
And here he is, Juan like tearing up, like trying to tell him his encounter. But it's like, no, I don't have time. Come back later.
Yeah. And I think by all accounts, it wasn't dismissive. The bishop legitimately had things to do, and it was like, he was pretty gracious with Juan, but was like, I actually don't have time for this right now. So Juan leaves and he goes back to Tepeyac Hill in order to disappointedly tell Our Lady. So he goes back and she's there waiting for him. Yeah. Which is so cool. And he says to her, he approaches her and he says, I beg you, noble lady, entrust this message to someone of importance, someone well known and respected, so that your wish will be accomplished, for I am only a lowly peasant. Right, so here's this. I think this is very important.
I think this is very important. Yeah.
Juan is like, I'm poor. I'm nobody. Why are you giving me this message?
How am I going to be credible? I don't have any rank.
Exactly.
This is a relatively new civilization that's building all these stuff. Who am I living in the mountains with my uncle who's dying, just trying to go to mass? What can I do to help this? And I think, me personally, I think this is one of the things that makes Juan Dieguitos, I should say, testimony so credible, is the fact that he is kind of an illiterate, poor peasant.
He's nobody.
Why? What does he benefit from doing this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you could say, oh, he's just doing this to make money. That's not a very good argument because
he didn't
want
money.
He didn't want any of that. In fact, he was telling our mother, I don't want this. He kind of reminds me of a prophet. The prophets oftentimes, one of the ways you know a prophet is a prophet, for example, in the Old Testament, is that they would say, no, I'm not worthy. Yeah. No, Lord, don't choose me. Right. No, I'm a sinner. No, I don't need this. I don't want this. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's how you can trust the testimony of somebody that, no, in fact, this mission should be entrusted to them precisely because they're quote unquote incapable in the world's eyes. But here's this man who's able to, in his poverty, in his simplicity, accept the will of God and carry it forth to somebody like the Bishop of Zumarraga. Again, or somebody like Bishop Zumarraga, who was a former bishop of Spain, who holds a high rank in society. Right. And here's this interesting interplay in our mother's command between kind of the powerful and the simple coming together here. You know what I'm saying? There's this kind of beautiful narrative that's underlining all of this. And so to keep in mind that the poor can always tell us about God in a very credible way, even though sometimes they're easily dismissed or seen as incoherent.
And I'm thinking of St. Paul. He said in 1 Corinthians, I think, or maybe 2 Corinthians, God chose the weak of the world to shame the strong, and the foolish of the world to shame the wise, right? This is what God chooses the most unlikely vessels in order to make known his glory all the more. Like Mother Teresa, I'm thinking like
that's been my experience even as a lowly seminarian, dude.
Yeah.
Mother Teresa, yeah, exactly. But I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Mother Teresa by any extreme, I'm much taller than her, but yeah. So I'm glad you got it.
I was thinking something else, and then I heard you, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah, no, but at the same time though, like there's this kind of, I don't know if I can do this mission, Lord.
Right.
And you read a life of the saints, someone like Mother Teresa or any of the saints, and you're like, I can't.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah, how do you want me to do this? Right. You think this person's going to listen to me?
And that's where God wants you.
On your knees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Okay, so this is what Juan Diego says. I'm nobody, and Our Lady says to him, listen to me, my dearest son, and understand that I have many servants and messengers whom I could charge with the delivery of my message. But it is altogether necessary that you should be the one to undertake this mission, and that it be through your mediation and assistance that my wish should be accomplished. I urge you to go to the bishop again tomorrow. Tell him in my name, and make him fully understand my disposition, that he should undertake the erection of the temple for which I ask. And repeat to him that it is I, in person, the ever-Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, who sends you. Right, so this is what Mary wants. She wants a temple built on this hill, Tepeyac, right, in which she's going to bring comfort to the sorrowing and health to the sick, right? So this is the message. So, okay, Juan, he's like, okay. So he's kind of recharged, reanimated, pumped up by this assurance of Our Lady. So he goes home for the night and he wakes up early the next day. So this is December 10th, Sunday, December 10th, 1531.
Boom.
He wakes up early to make that 15-mile journey back to Mexico
Nothing
City
like it.
To present himself again to the bishop. And amazingly, the servants see him again, and they're pretty surprised that this guy's back the next day. But he is, and so they let him in again after some confrontation.
This is when he was waiting for hours, right?
This is when he's waiting for hours for the bishop to come, and I think it was really cold, so he was just kind of sitting there in the cold.
Well.
And finally, the servants notify the bishop, "Hey, there's this guy here who's been waiting for you for hours. You want to come talk to him?" And so the bishop comes out and listens to him, and he hears him out. So he hears Juan's whole story out. And Juan is so humble and so earnest that Bishop Zumarraga is pretty moved. He's impressed by his what seems to be, an authentic message, but he's not totally convinced, right? He needs more, and so he asks Juan to bring some sort of sign, some sort of evidence that this message is truly from Our Lady.
Yep.
And to bring it back to him at a later date and present him with this evidence, and then he'll consider building this temple that Juan is requesting be built.
Unless you think you have this narrative, as many like to paint through popular media or whatever, that like the Catholic Church just takes these quote unquote miracles because we think that they're going to build credibility for the church off of face value, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's not the way the church assesses these kind of large miraculous things that she holds to her life. Like, oftentimes when you're talking about even like Eucharistic miracles or this particular example, there's skepticism, there's doubt, there's required evidence. A long time, for example, in 2002, it wasn't until 2002 that Juan Diego was canonized because like there's a whole process to studying the history, to knowing the people, the kind of the devotion that revolves around these things. It's not, or taking even more so like the credibility of our Lord's existence, like the historical Jesus, if you will. Here, it's like, it's not just one person seeing this or saying, hey, this is the greatest thing in the world. It's multitudes of people's testimony who you can kind of see as something credible. That's not necessarily scientifically evidential all the time, although this particular event does have some history and science backing it. But always keeping in mind that. So. Yeah,
the church is reasonable and rational and wants credibility for the things that she is going to declare to be authentic. So, So the bishop sends Juan away, asking him to bring back a sign. And Juan goes back to Tepeyac, the hill at Tepeyac, and there Our Lady is waiting for him. And he reports this to her, and he says, the bishop asked me for a sign. He didn't fully believe me, so I need to take him a sign. And then Our Lady responds, "You want to read that one? This one's good." I think they're all good. I mean, it's Our Lady speaking.
Thank you for giving me the good one.
Yeah.
That is very well, my little son.
I love how she calls him my little son.
My little son.
She says the same thing to you and to me and to my little daughter, to her daughters. I mean, she is a loving mother. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
That is very well, my little son. Return here tomorrow, and you will have the sign he has requested. Then he will believe and no longer doubt or suspect you. Mark my words well, my little son. I shall richly reward you for all the worry, work, and trouble you have undertaken only on my behalf. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, on my behalf. So I typed these pretty quick.
Okay. You may go home now tomorrow. I'll be waiting here for you.
Okay, so Juan is assured that if he comes back the next day, December 11th, he'll get the sign that he'll be able to take to the bishop. But a problem happens. He goes home, and his uncle is really, really sick.
Yeah.
And he's on the point of death.
So much so that he's like, Juan Diego, I need you to go grab a priest.
Well, first he spends that whole night of December 10th.
That's right, yeah.
And then the whole next day, December 11th, at his uncle's bedside. So he doesn't go back to see Our Lady, even though she said, hey, come back tomorrow. So that was probably a mistake. But
it also shows his humility. Like, why? Like, if he was interested in something, why wouldn't he just do like,
right? He's
like, no, I have this.
And, he's probably thinking to himself, am I crazy? I've been envisioning these things. Here's my uncle's dying, and I'm about to abandon him to go to, he's probably, really concerned for his uncle,
Yeah.
So he stays with his uncle Juan Bernardino the whole day.
Well done.
Thank you. And he, so he doesn't go back to Our Lady. And then the next day, so this is now Monday, December 12th, or Tuesday, December 12th. This is the day, right? This is the big day that his uncle is about to die. And so he says, Juan, I need you to go to Mexico City to get the priest.
Yeah. This is my last
This is it. I need to confess my sins and receive the last rites. And so Juan Diego sets off again, 15-mile journey back the other way. And he's going, he's making haste, and he gets to Tepeyac Hill. And he's like, okay, I'm not going up there, because if I go up there, she's going to be there waiting for me. And I got to figure this. I got to help my uncle first. I don't have time for this.
It's crazy.
Going to the bishop again right now.
The Mother of God is just not right now. Okay.
So he kind of skirts around the side of the hill, thinking that he would escape her notice. What a fool.
Silly goose.
She comes down, and it's amazing to read the descriptions of these. I mean, every time he encounters her, it's an overwhelming experience of light and this beautiful fragrance.
So I just music. I just thinking about how he may have acted. He's looking at the hill, he's like, oh crap. Okay, I got it. I'm gonna go this way. He's like hiding. He's like, oh no, she's gonna be there. And he's walking. He's like, yeah. Oh, there she is. Yeah.
So she comes down and she's like, what's the matter, my little son? Where are you going? And he says to her, he explains to her the situation. He's like, my uncle's dying. I'll come back tomorrow. I swear to finish the mission that you've entrusted me with, but I got to help my uncle first. And then this is what Our Lady says to him. And this is the big quote. I mean, this is very moving to me every time I read it. So she says, listen and let it penetrate your heart, my dear little son. Do not be troubled or weighed down with grief. Do not fear any illness or vexation, anxiety or pain. Am I not here, I who am your mother? Are you not under my shadow and protection? Am I not your fountain of life? Are you not in the folds of my mantle? In the crossing of my arms? Is there anything else you need? Do not let the illness of your uncle worry you, because he is not going to die of his sickness. At this very moment, he is cured. So those are beautiful, beautiful words of Our Lady. I mean, in prayer, those come to me a lot. Am I not here? Am I not your mother?
And Juan Diego had apologized to our Blessed Mother before she kind of responded to him, right? And so he had kind of told her, hey, look, I'm sorry I didn't come the day you told me. I'm sorry I've been trying to avoid you, but my uncle's dying, and I need to find a priest to give him the last rites. And I wonder if there was also a kind of level of fear with him, too. He's like, I don't want to do this. And she's like, what's wrong with you? Let me help you. And guess what? Your uncle's okay. And do what I asked you to do. Yeah. And in fact, that's what happened, right? So he goes back home, and his uncle is safe and sound.
Well, that was after this. So he says, okay. And then he goes to the bishop's house. Now, after it's all finished up, after everything kind of comes to pass, and he eventually returns home, he does find that, yes, his uncle is totally cured. Yeah. And that Our Lady had appeared to his uncle.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so that was a big deal. But after Our Lady says this to him, he's like, okay, I trust you. So he sets off back to the bishop's house on the mission. And he goes and he's banging on the doors, and the servants are not happy to see this crazy guy back. But, oh wait, no, I forgot about the most important part. Our Lady gives him the sign first, because he's got to take the sign back to the bishop. How
could you forget that?
I don't know.
How'd you just go over that story? Dude, we're kind of everywhere right now.
Okay. Yeah, we are, but that's okay. Let's keep trucking away. So there's that beautiful quote from Our Lady. She says, don't worry about your uncle.
I got you.
Go up to the top of Tepeyac Hill, and there you'll see the sign to take to bishop. Yeah. So Juan climbs up Tepeyac Hill, and there in the frozen and rocky soil are Castilian roses.
Rosas castellanas.
Yeah, which not only do not grow in Mexico, not only could they not have grown in that rocky soil,
sure,
but also they were the favorite type of rose of Bishop Zumarraga, who came from Spain.
Yep.
Right, so they're there. There's this overwhelming fragrance of,
which is almost a miracle in itself, right?
It is a miracle in itself. I mean, that's a miracle.
So the ground is frozen.
Yeah.
Right. It's infertile. Okay. And there's a rose that's native to Spain growing in this particular area, which our Blessed Mother had pointed out to him that would be there, was asked to then put the roses in his mantle.
Yeah. So he gathers them up into his tilma. Right?
Tilma, I should say. Yeah. That's a word. And that tilma itself is kind of indicative of his poverty.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So a tilma is like a garment.
Yeah, it's like a little garment.
Traditional Aztec garment made of like the fibers from a cactus plant or something like that.
Exactly. And so it's a very kind of, it shows you the level of his poverty. For example, there was a few practical things that the tilma was kind of used for. It could be used as a washcloth. It could be used as like a head gear or head covering when it was raining outside. It could be used as a bag to store things in, or in this case as a kind of a storage unit, a tote of a thing. It could also be used as like a blanket or a pillow when you were walking 15 miles to church or to the city or to wherever to take a nap or whatever, and so it kind of is indicative of who he was as a person.
It's a good sign, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
that's the best sign.
He gathers up these Castilian roses in his tilma, and he brings them back to Our Lady, and now she's like, okay, take those to the bishop and show him the roses, and that will be the sign. Now she says don't open the tilma until you get there, right? Until you get there and tell him the story, tell him everything that you just experienced, and then open the tilma. And so then that's what Juan does. He runs back to the bishop's place. Now the servants greet him. They're frustrated to see this crazy guy back, but he's got this tilma. And I think he actually gets admitted in for this third time by giving them a sneak peek of the roses. Yeah. Right? He's like, look at that. And so the servants are like, okay, we'll go get the bishop. Right? So he gets in and he's tearfully and overwhelmingly recounting this whole story to the bishop. And he says, okay, bishop, here it is. Here's the sign that you asked for. And he opens up his tilma. The Castilian roses fall to the floor, and they smell beautiful, so that everyone's like overwhelmed by their fragrance. But then, in that very moment, what happens?
There's a painting that appears on the tilma, a painting of our Blessed Mother's presence, her humility,
her image, her sacred image,
and the image carries with it so much significance. For the people that were there before the Spanish came and the people after. And that the presence of our Blessed Mother appeared on the tilma, showing the bishop now, in fact, this was her presence.
This was from her.
This command was her, and that her presence was with Juan Diego and the people of Mexico now.
Yeah, so there's this, exactly. This miraculous image shows up on the tilma that Juan Diego wasn't even expecting. He thought the miracle was the roses. And then he looks down and he's like, oh, like, look at that. So apparently the bishop and his attendants, they fall to their knees in adoration of this image, overwhelmed with the majesty of it, with the beauty of it. And eventually, after they rise from their knees, he embraces Juan Diego, apologizes for having doubted him, and immediately orders a small chapel to be built on the site of Tepeyac Hill, where Our Lady had desired a temple to be built. And
where the serpent god
had, the serpent goddess, the mother goddess, had formerly resided, right? Yeah. So now there's this, now the true mother of God, not just this pagan mother goddess. Sure. The true mother of God is here, and she has a dwelling place here. And so initially they just built this little chapel, but the bishop immediately starts planning to erect a mass, like a big, beautiful, glorious Basilica. Church in order to honor Our Lady's wishes. Meanwhile, there's this glorious, revelation of this image. Everyone comes to realize that it's an authentic manifestation of Our Lady, and eventually this little chapel is built. Juan Diego actually spends the rest of his life living in this little chapel on Tepeyac Hill with the image, with the tilma there. and pilgrims would come to venerate it and to adore it and to be cured of their illnesses in front of it. And he spent the rest of his life guarding it, being the custodian of it, telling the story to pilgrims who came. He went, we already mentioned, he went back to his uncle who was totally cured and who had himself received an apparition from Our Lady, right? And so that's kind of the story of events as they occurred. But now we should talk about the image itself, right?
Sure.
Like the Tilma.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you've seen the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe somewhere in your life, in popular culture, on a t-shirt somewhere. If you haven't, maybe I'm sure we'll put it right here on the video, but you can also look it up. It's a beautiful, beautiful image. Apparently nothing is like seeing it in real life. Apparently seeing it in real life is like, it's like colors far and away. The colors are amazing. And, but do you want to describe some of the symbolism in the Tilma first before we get into some of the miraculous aspects of the scientifically inexplicable features of the Tilma? Yeah.
So, well, first I would like to talk about like some of the significance that the Aztec people would have known and been aware of in seeing the image itself.
Yeah.
So one of the things this author that I'm referring to here is Paul Bade or Bad. This Ignatius Press released a book. I'll put a link to it below. One of the things he writes in his book from a historian's perspective is that the Amerindians, the cross of the Madonna's brooch, was a clear reference to the conqueror's god. The Aztecs had always been sensitive to signs in the sky and apparitions in the heavens. Their language and writing consisted of such signs. For them, the rays protecting her shoulders, so again, the image will show the rays protecting her shoulders, were a meteor, a comet cutting across the heavens. That the Virgin blocked the sun was a clear sign that there would no longer be human sacrifices to the sun.
To the sun god, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To whom they had in past sacrificed whole tribes even. In the royal turquoise, they identify a queen.
Yeah, so the color of Mary's mantle in this image is like a turquoise. It's like a greenish blue, which was the color of royalty in the Aztec culture.
Yeah.
Right, so she's clearly a queen.
Even though she bore no crown. By the flowers, they understood that all creation was her clothing, and that in her bestarred mantle, they understood that her outer garments was the whole cosmos. Nonetheless, it was obvious to them that she could not be a goddess, since she herself was clearly adoring someone.
She has her hands folded in prayer position. Her head is bent.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's not God. Yeah.
Gods do not join their hands like this woman, and goddesses do not bow their heads with such humility.
Yeah.
The image rapidly began to speak to them without a single word being uttered. They could even dance out the rhythm of the race surrounding the Mother of God. She would heal their sorrows.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. I mean, it's like it's as if God knows the human heart. You know?
Yeah. So I mean, what's crazy is this woman, Our Lady, appeared in this form, in this image, specifically in this historical context, and to evangelize this Aztec people.
Yes.
And everything about this sacred image was meant to speak to them and to instruct them about the reality of God and Christianity, right? Here she is, the queen of heaven and earth, but who's not herself God, who's bowing her head in reverence to the mighty one, right? Because she's the mother of God. She's wearing there's a black band around her waist, signifying that she's with child. Right? She's pregnant. Yeah. The black cross on the brooch of her necklace is the same as the black cross that came on the helmets and the banners of the Spanish conquistadors, signifying their religion. Right?
She's stepping on a serpent.
She's stepping on the moon, which was equated with the serpent god. Right? So she's crushing the serpent. The temple is at the place that the old Mother Goddess's temple used to be. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's amazing.
Yeah, and there's so much to go into. I mean, her eyes, her presence.
I'm going to talk a little bit about her
there's
eyes.
all kinds of stuff kind of attached to this that really is miraculous. I mean, wonderful.
Yeah.
In the truest sense of the word.
Yeah.
Full of wonder.
So a couple more cool things about the Tilma, which still exists. It's still in Mexico City in the Basilica.
Interesting,
right?
Also that for many years, it wasn't until like 1930 or 40 that they put it in a casing.
Exactly. Okay, so this is great. So the material out of which the Tilma is made, this ayate fiber, does decompose and decay after 20 years.
Yeah, it's like 20, 30 years. Yeah,
is 20 years.
Yeah.
This Tilma was taken to and put in this chapel, uncovered, this small, damp, dark chapel with candles and incense and literally millions of pilgrims over the next many, many years coming in, touching it, embracing it, kissing it, and it's untouched. It shows no signs of decay, almost no signs of decay. So the fact that it still exists in and of itself is scientifically inexplicable.
I mean, think about it. You walk in this chapel and there's this tilma, just cloth, kind of nailed to a wall that millions of people have touched. I mean, anything even strong, even these curtains, right, they're made from, nicer material, cloth material.
They're going to decay.
They're going to decay after a certain amount of usage. But here's this tilma that should not be in existence, even if not used for 20 years.
I know. What I mean? Yeah, even if it were just but not to mention the dangerous environments to which it was exposed. It also, throughout the course of its history, over the 500 years, it has had nitric acid spilled on it by a scientist who was doing tests on it, which should have completely burned it up. But it left like a small watermark.
Also,
on the Tilma.
In 1950, I want to say 1920, early 1900s, the anti-Catholic regime
in the Cristeros. 1921. It was. Okay. 1921.
So so in the former half of the 20th century, you have somebody put in dynamite in one of the rose vases that was attributed to her and blew up.
Blew up the chapel.
Blew up the chapple, the altar, everything is wrecked. All the marble is gone.
And the Tilma was just behind a piece of glass, just a normal sheet of glass, and it was unscathed.
And the only thing it had is like a little stain, but nothing significant. And still, if you go to the chapel here, one of the crosses that was there is kind of just bent.
They have it there to show the disfigurement of the chapel.
So again, these are kind of things you're like, what? I don't get it.
So the Tilma itself should have rotted centuries ago. It should not have kind of withstood all of the environments to which it's been exposed over the course of so scientists in and of themselves, that in and of itself is enough to say, okay, something scientifically unexplainable is going on here. And then they get into more, it's been subjected to many scientific tests, right?
Sure, many.
And one of the things that they've discovered in the early 1900s is that in the eyes of Our Lady, right? First of all, the eyes on the Tilma respond to light in the same way that a real eye does.
What did they call it? I saw it here. So here I have a book that also references many doctors. It's ophthalmologist, Dr. Javier Torreya. He calls it the Samson-Purkinje effect. Sorry, I probably butchered that word, but it's the fact that's kind of reflective and it corresponds to the way an eye actually works.
Right. And so, and they found deep within her cornea the image of a man, the face of a bearded man. This was in the 1950s. Yeah. And the kind of what do you call it? The distortion and the place of the image in her cornea perfectly resembles the distortion in the place of a normal image in a cornea if you were to take a photograph of a human eye, which no one could have known about in 1530 to have painted it. Also, and that face has been identified with contemporary paintings of Juan Diego as Juan Diego. So it's like Our Lady took a snapshot of Juan Diego and he's there in her eyes, which respond to light even to this day as though they're living eyes. And then infrared photography and technology has revealed that they actually don't know how the color was produced on the Tilma itself. There's no brush strokes underneath. It's certainly not paint. There's no sketch of the image underneath so that someone might have, fabricated this or painted it themselves. And the contours of the Tilma, so the fabrics and the blemishes on the Tilma, are perfectly woven in and incorporated into the facial features of Our Lady. So her lip, for example, it's the Tilma is raised where her lip is in a perfect way that a lip would be raised. So it's just it's unbelievable.
Yeah. There's also, there's physicists and Adolfo Orozco, a researcher and physicist of the National University of Mexico, who has kind of spoken about it. There's 1921, this example. It was 1921, well done. The bomb blew up, nothing happened. 1979, all right, not even that long ago, Philip Callahan, he can't be Mexican. There's no way this guy can be Mexican. But anyways, he's an accomplished biologist and author of numerous scientific books. He studied the infrared photographic kind of science behind it. Tests of the Tilma could not figure out what was going on here. We had the ophthalmologist that we just mentioned. We had an engineer in 1981, Peruvian engineer, who had spoken about kind of the light rays and the resolution and all this stuff, and had imaged it and had pinpointed all the kind of the different kind of ultraviolet light that was hitting it. They don't know how to recreate it or anything like that. In 1998, there was the secret in her eyes that you'd mentioned. Astronomy. This is one of the things that I found interesting.
Yeah,
there's an astronomist in December 22nd in 1981, which is not what we would say kind of exactly contemporary, but it's contemporary enough to where it matters. There was they concluded that the stars that were in the Tilma were consistent on her cloak were consistent with the sky above Mexico City on the day of the apparition, on the day that the apparition occurred.
With the constellations.
Exactly. So the constellation on her cloak matched the day that they are said to have portrayed. I mean,
and I think I've heard this. I'd have to fact check it, but the constellation that is over top of her womb is the one of the lion. So it's like the Lion of Judah, right?
Yeah.
Jesus, like himself.
I heard that somewhere too. Where did I read that? Yeah.
So the image is supernatural.
Sure.
I mean, it's almost scientifically proven to be supernatural.
Sure.
And because of it, and because of its supposed just like unbelievable beauty, like we said, millions and millions of people immediately came to venerate it.
And the whole country of Mexico still stands as one of the largest populated Catholic.
It transformed that culture forever.
Yeah, country in the world. Like, it still remains that.
So we mentioned the Protestant Reformation was going on over in Europe. Supposedly millions of, I think supposedly 9 million people left the church in
that's right.
throughout the course of the Protestant Reformation. So here in Mexico, after the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and because of that apparition, the Franciscans had been struggling to evangelize. After this apparition and the subsequent number of years, 9 million baptisms. 9 million
an
baptisms.
eye for an eye.
Exactly. It's amazing, like how God in his providence was filling up what was being emptied over in Europe. And I mean, there's stories of priests doing like 10, 12, 14,000 baptisms in a single day. People just coming in droves to be baptized, to encounter the gospel, all through the inspiration and motherly mediation of Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, of Our Lady. And I guess I actually don't have much longer. I have to go here in a few minutes. So why don't we finish up by just talking about, I'm curious to you, growing up as a Chicano, what has your experience of the devotion to Our Lady been? It's certainly been, I know, kind of secularized in some senses in Mexico. So can you just talk about that, and then maybe a final word of encouragement to our listeners to cultivate a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe?
So like any devotion in the church, I think it can be taken to extremes. Either people don't care about it enough,
right,
or maybe people care about it too much, place too much emphasis to where kind of is detrimental to the faith of others who aren't so familiar with kind of the Catholic spirituality. And so you have that within the Hispanic community. So my exposure to our Blessed Mother actually has been pretty wholesome. Las mañanitas, posadas, when time comes around. So like this season, I mean, my family would always do all kinds of stuff, novenas to our Blessed Mother. We have a painting of her in my house, a replica at least. We have a painting. I mean, I can't think of a family, maybe one or two Hispanic families that's either family or friends of ours that doesn't have Our Virgen La Morenita up in the wall somewhere, like you said, on a T-shirt, on their keychain, a tattoo, on their walls, wherever. Like, there's always Our Blessed Mother La Morenita, Nuestra Virgencita is always somewhere present. My devotion to her through my family has always been consistent, and I mean, she's a big part of our life. It's not like. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of devotions to our Blessed Mother, but the one that I think most people that go to church throughout these days are aware of is like Las Mañanitas and the devotion, the processions with our image. But I will also kind of caution against making her an idol, because she herself would not have done that. And in fact, an image itself, as to the Aztecs, points beyond itself, points to our Lord Jesus Christ and the Trinity ultimately. And so our Blessed Mother, even in her eyes reflects her son, and points us to her son. And so always beautiful to keep these devotions within our hearts. Piety is a gift of God. Devotions are a gift from God for us, for man to encounter him, right? And so obviously Nuestra Virgencita needs to be kind of at the forefront, at least a way of engaging God, but it's not engaging God himself. And I think that as Catholics, as Christians who even are not Catholic, we can look to our Blessed Mother, the Mother of God, right, as the one who loves you, takes care of you, protects you, wishes the best for you, and ultimately wants your salvation through being the mediator for her son. And I think as a Hispanic, I've been fortunate to kind of have fostered this particular Marian devotion into our, and I know many cultures have different Marian devotions, but por mi gente, recen un rosario, hagan un Ave Maria, just thanking our Blessed Mother for your own mother, right? That's one of the things I want to talk about earlier. I think as I kind of full circle here.
Oh yeah, you mentioned this.
In the Hispanic culture, the mother plays a very important role. I mean, the father does too, but the mother has a particular role of strength, of fidelity, of constancy. And in my own life, I would venture to say that it's been my mi Virgencita that has been taking care of my mother, my grandmother a lot. And so when I kind of, throughout these days that I've kind of devoted to La Virgencita, I always thank her for my own mother and my own grandmother, because I know that they pray to her basically every day.
Yeah.
You know, there very few days go by that they're not acclaiming her name for me, for her children, for her husband, for her extended family, close family. And so as kind of these days come about, these Christmas days come about, we remember the coming of our blessed Lord, Jesus Christ, and also the importance of our mother. And I think it's timely.
He always comes to us through her.
Always. So to Jesus through Mary, right? And that's kind of the message I'll leave. You know, as a Hispanic American, I'm privileged to have this devotion, but it shouldn't be limited to this devotion,
right?
And it's not limited to the culture, of the people, but it is the grace of God that they had an apparition, and my
and if you get a chance, go visit. I hope to this upcoming year get to go to Mexico to visit the Basilica, and
I'll be living at the seminary that's kind of related to this. So what's up, dude? We'll see each other. Come on, dog. Okay, and dude, what's up?
That was fun.
I've
been growing over these past weeks, months, years in devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe a lot.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and I'm really excited for her feast day coming up.
Me too.
On December 12th. Make sure you celebrate it.
Boom.
Little feast day in the middle of Advent, which is always fun. Right after the Immaculate Conception too, so it's kind of like Marian time. But yeah, we hope you enjoy this episode. Get to know Our Lady of Guadalupe. She's awesome, and that's all I have to say.
Cool, bro. Well, we need to get you out of here before you're late.
I got a meeting that starts right now,
and you get fired.
It's 20 minutes away.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning into this episode. As always, God bless.